Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. It's our Breeders' Cup 2015 edition. And joining me again this week is Capping with Candace. Candace, we're going to go down to kind of down and dirty picks. We've been talking about the Breeders' Cup for the last few weeks and been giving out a lot of online tips and kind of how the way we're going to look at these races. But now it's time to actually make selections. And, first off, what we're trying to do here on Down to the Wire is for some of you who just want picks, that's what they're for. But for other people, really what we're trying to do is just give a horse that maybe you take a second look at, maybe you kind of shake your head and go through the form one more time. Some of the horses include, some of the horses don't include, but we're really just trying to give you horses that maybe you want to throw on a ticket or take a second look at rather than saying, yeah, here's 13 winners. We'll kind of just take it from there. And that's kind of how you approach this, not necessarily where we think we actually can pick 9 straight winners on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a day where you want to pick your spots, but if we're able to, make note of some horses we might think are vulnerable favorites or some live long shots you can throw underneath, that's how you get through these big days. Not necessarily betting every single race in a row, but in that hand, the first race here is the Juvenile Fillies, race 3 on Saturday. And this isn't, I don't see this race as being a race that's ripe for a huge long shot. I like Songbird in here. I think her draw is perfect. She'll be able to just cross right over as the speed of the speed. And to be honest, this is a race that I see as being a pretty chalky one. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Landover C, who was second to her last time out, ends up running second again. She was, I thought she ran very nicely there. Just Songbird was much better than her at this point in time, but Songbird to me is just a very precocious filly. She's a very professional at this point in her career, but she's not going to be a Kentucky Oaks filly. This is her time right now. So I'd be looking for Songbird in this spot over Landover C, but a race that I think, when we're starting out, I think there's a pick 4 that starts in this race. You're, going to probably want a single Songbird is how I would approach it. I just don't see a lot of chances for the longer shots in this race.
Yeah, I think they're kind of building it as an east-west matchup between uh, Rachel's Valentina and Songbird. But really, even the third and fourth favorites are kind of east and west with Tap to It and Landover C. Uh, it's kind of hard to really go beyond the top 3, 4 horses.
It is, and I don't even really see it as much of a matchup between Songbird and Rachel's Valentina, to be honest. I would rather take Landover C than I would Rachel's Valentina. I just think Rachel's Valentina has obviously gotten a lot of hype considering her breeding. I thought that, obviously the races she's ran to date were visually impressive, but there's a lot of questions. I don't like that they decided to train her up to the race when you and I know whatever race she would have ran and leading up to this, she would have been a very heavy favorite and it probably would have cut a small field. So to me, it's just kind of a bad sign. She also missed a work not that long ago. So for a horse who's going to be a very short price, I think she's the one I would try to kind of chuck out of my exactas and tries and try to beat her.
Yeah, I'm just going to go with Tap to It. I think they're equal, and I think Tap to It will be 4 times the odds of Rachel's Valentina. And they both trained up to this race. I just think Tap to It probably is a little bit more precocious with the Tappet breeding. Those Tappet fillies seem to do really well at 2. So I'm just going to go with Tap to It, and Songbird is probably the most likely favorite. The next race is the Sprint Turf, and this year it's a little bit different because the last couple of years it's been downhill, and I don't think people realize 5.5 on the turf is totally different experience than down the hill 6.5 at Santa Anita.
Yes, it's very different, and post position wise is obviously where it's very different as well. We're used to Santa Anita where those outside posts are the favorable ones given that, little bend at the beginning of the downhill course, but we're back to normal here. I think this is a race where you want to be drawn somewhere in the middle towards you don't want to be drawn 1 or 2 and you don't want to be drawn 13 or 14. So somewhere in the middle where you have some breathing room I think would be ideal in this spot, but nevertheless, and I've said it to anyone who would listen, Undrafted is my single for the day. This is a horse who all of my bets are going to go through Undrafted unless something mind-boggling happens. He just, to me, is light years better than this field. The only concern is the distance, 5.5. I think he's better over 6, but even still, knowing that there's still rain on the way, knowing that the superintendent of the course said that there's no way it's going to be firm ground on Saturday, then I think any sort of cut in the ground only helps his cause. It makes it more of a stamina testing affair, and he's gone fine over soft ground. He ran a very nice race behind Slade Power at Newmarket last summer in the July Stakes over soft ground, and that would be against horses who love soft ground, let alone the ones here who half of them won't travel a lick over that sort of ground. So undrafted to me is a horse who I'm going to really play heavily in spots, because even if he goes off favorite in this race, he's not the morning line favorite, but if he goes off favorite, he's going to be a favorite who's 3-1, 7-2. He's a horse who I think has just as good of a chance to win this as some of the other horses we're hearing talked about as everybody's singles, except that not everybody's going to single him. I think most people look at this race as a pretty chaotic one, but all the signs and trends of these races points to him. You typically want a closer over this rut at Keeneland as well, so I'm all over undrafted.
Yeah, I'm going to take a 3-year-old in this race. I just think Ready for Rye is fast. That doesn't really mean anything, but I just think he's a fast, talented horse, and if he really is fast and talented, he might win. And if he's not, I guess he'll run 8th, but I guess I'd rather just take a shot with him. And I know he's got speed, and he's actually got turf breeding, and he's never not been fast. And maybe at 5.5 furlongs, maybe there's just a chance to get a big purse. So he kind of missed some of the other big dances, so maybe this is just a shot at a big purse for him.
Well, and that is one thing I would say with a race like this, Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, and I would say probably the same is the case for the Dirt Sprint. At these short distances, when you're handicapping the race, I wouldn't be concerned, like you say, about a 3-year-old, or I wouldn't be concerned about a horse who maybe 4 starts ago he was a claimer. Like these are the distances where class gets to become a very gray area, because it's just who's the fastest.
That race may have some chaotic factors, but I think there's actually some strong horses. I'm not into, I mean, chaos to me means 8 or 9 can win, and I really think one of the 4 or 5 favorites will win. I'm just not actually quite sure who will be favored or second favorite, but I think once the betting gets sorted out, that might determine, top 3, 4 horses. The next race is the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare and Sprint. It's 7 furlongs. And that sometimes is unusual because the boys run their sprint at 6 furlongs. And again, we get some milers cutting back. We get some 6 furlongers stretching out. And this year it's at Keeneland. And I think there's, 4 or 5 horses that could be anywhere from 4-1 to 7-1 on the board.
It could. And I mean, it's a race that's ripe for the taking when you have La Verdad is going to be probably 5-1 or so. And there's just no way she's going to stay 7 furlongs. Obviously, she just ran the other day as well. Sweet Whiskey will be up near the front. Taurus, I think, is talented, but I wonder how pace compromised she's going to be going forward with Stone-tastic only has one way to go. So there's quite a bit of speed in here. This is a race that I think, at least what I'm looking at right now, is I'm looking to play a horse in here who has a big price and just kind of ladder it across the board. And that horse for me is Kiss to Remember. I'm not sure she's quite of the class of the top fillies in here to win, but I think she's going to get just the dream setup in here coming from the back. And she's ran well in big spots. She was second to Unbridled Forever in the Ballerina, and I mean, we both know had Unbridled Forever showed up in this spot, she would have been among the favorites in here. And we see Kiss to Remember on the board at 30-1, but I just think she's sneaky in here. I think she's one of the few horses in this race that 7 furlongs really is her trip. So she'll be one who I plan to ladder across the board, and I'll probably use her in some exactas, maybe with Judith's Beauty or with cavorting, but she's kind of my, bomb key to this race.
Yeah, I ended up taking, it just seems like you're going to have a lot of pace with Taurus and La Verdad. And again, I don't think, La Verdad's got a 6-1 morning line, but this is really just, they've already announced they're going to retire her. This is a type of horse I love because they never got over there. Linda Rice campaigned this horse perfectly. One time she attempted a grade 1 in the ballerina. She got beat, finished 5th to Artis Arga. And then otherwise they just spotted her in New York races and grade 3s and grade 2s. She's 6 for 6 on the year, $660,000. They can just let her close out her career. I don't think she really has a chance to win it, especially off, carrying the 124 pounds on 6 days rest. I ended up going with Dame Dorothy just because she chased La Verdad a couple of times and now she gets a full field. And I think she can at least get 7 furlongs. Some of these horses just can't get it.
Yes.
So I'll just take her just because I know, she may not be the fastest and I don't even know what the trip's going to end up being like, but some of these horses are just going to stop. And so horses like Kisses to Remember. I do like Stone-tastic, but if La Verdad has enough, just throw her off her game for, 2-3 furlongs, or Taurus, I'm just more worried about just dueling her into the ground. Then I just want anybody that'll still have a pulse at the 16th pole. And I think Dame Dorothy, the race will be too short for her to get tired, so I just think she'll just kind of plug it along.
Yeah, I think that's how I'm approaching the race the same way. I think the key to this race is picking out the horses who you think really stay 7 furlongs, because it's probably not even half this field, and then those are the ones you're going to want to use in your multiple race wagers. This definitely to me is a spread race.
That race is always fun, and some good horses win that race. Groupie Doll, and last year I think we saw a top-notch performance. So whoever does step up, it's usually a good performance. Just sometimes you don't know who it's going to be.
Yes.
The Breeders' Cup Turf, filly and mare, grade 1, $2 million. And this race, the Americans this year, it's basically been take-turn division.
It has. I think a few horses have disappointed this year, or some of the horses aren't quite what they used to be. This race, it's really hard to make a case against Legatissimo. She's been pointing to the spot since June or July, they've been saying, and she's just a top class filly overseas. I think she's going to kind of trip out here as well. I'd expect Centurio Italia to go forward. I'd expect Secret Gesture to go forward, and she can just kind of sit in behind them and strike at the end of the race. So I think, she's a horse to be keying in spots for sure. If you're looking for any sort of price underneath at all, I think the one I'd lean to is Photo Call. I really liked her win in California. I think that she's been a little bit pace compromised in a few situations, but she seems to be rounding into form at the right time, and Grand Motion knows how to have them ready for these sorts of spots, and the ground with the potential for it to be softer, that's a non-issue for her. So Photo Call would be kind of the one I'd want people to take note of in this race aside from the favorite.
What about Centurio Italia? This horse was 3 to 5 a couple of weeks ago, was 6 wide.
Yes.
There was a little scuttlebutt that some people thought that looked like just a prep, and they do wheel her back. I have no idea. All I know is she was 3 to 5 2 weeks ago, and now she's going to be 20 to 1.
Yeah, it did look a little weird, but I'm not sure the horse really showed me much there that day as well. I think, this is a horse who she's been running for a long time this year. She started in March, and she's around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 races. So for a young filly, this is her first year that she's been running. That's a lot of races. I think she's a horse who, on the day, if you're at the track or if you're at home watching on the feed, give a real good look at her. Go back and watch her other races to see how she looks in the flesh, typically for good or bad performances, and then give a good look at her on the day, because she would be one I'd be a little worried might be over the top.
Yeah, I know a lot of people seem to like Docita in here. Now, this is one of the most unique set of past performances you'll ever see. She's the Chilean sensation. She's 7 for 10, wins a grade 2 off a 9-month layoff, and then they decided to give her 60 days and then go into a 13-horse field in the Breeders' Cup. I don't know. She'll be a decent. They're all going to be 10 to 1, a lot of these horses, but can she win? And I don't know. It just seems like an unusual strategy.
I would think that if they're doing this with her, they must feel that she runs best fresh. You can't knock her win in the Boston Spa. Visually, it was just incredibly impressive. My worries for her would be, one, that she needs firm ground, which she's not going to get I'm worried she's going to be pace compromised because I don't see a lot of speed in here. Like I said, I see maybe some Terrio Italia's Secret Gesture going forward, but they're not, they're not fast front runners by any means. So how far out of it she's going to be, I'm not sure. That it might be too much, might be left with too much to do. And I'm definitely worried about her being overbent off the Chad Brown effect. So she might be one who, will I be a little bit scared of her beating on me on the day? For sure, but she seems like the logical horse to kind of let her beat you in this race.
Well, I'm just going to go with Ligatissimo in this spot. I mean, Ryan Moore won both those races at Woodbine last week. I really don't hope, I mean, I'm a fan of horse racing and not jockey racing, so I hope he loses one of these here because that gets a little silly when just one jockey goes 3 for 3. So hopefully he comes in second or something on one of these horses because, like I say, I like to handicap the horses and not just take whoever Ryan Moore's on. But he's a world-class rider, and he's so much far above everybody else right now that he's making his own trips in some of these races. Breeders' Cup Sprint, a wide open field going 6 furlongs.
It is, and I think of all the races on the meeting, this is the race that's really ripe for complete chaos. It all depends on Run Happy, who is not dependable when it comes to starts of races, so we don't totally know what he's going to do. But if he misses the start, he's going to try to go to the front, but I think from that inside draw, he might get shut out. But assuming he doesn't miss the start, I think he still is compromised. I don't think it's ideal at all for him to have Limousine Liberal next to him because Limousine Liberal is just a real speedster too. Wouldn't be surprised if those two dueled for a bit with Private Zone coming across as well. And I mean the same concern about Private Zone. Private Zone doesn't give anybody anything. He doesn't give any horse an inch. I think Private Zone is a horse that in a race like this he's going to win or he's going to take everybody out with him. And that's why I'm really projecting this race to melt down. California horses typically do well in this race, and it's not really a surprise. Their dirt sprinting division is always really strong, and I'm going to side with those. My top choice in here is Big Mocker. I loved how he ran in Dubai. I loved his prep for this race. It was just the most nice, easy, perfect prep coming into a race like this to kind of round him into form, not really bottom him out, but this is a race I can tell you right now I'm using 4, and they're all California. I'm going to use Big Mocker, I'm going to use Masochistic, I'm going to use Wild Dude, and I'm going to use Kobe's Back. And I think, this is just a race that, this is really the race to me where there's the real potential for a big prize to win.
Yeah, because I do think the board is going to get spread out. Run Happy is interesting. I mean, he's capable of winning.
Yes.
I mean, he's 4 for 5, and he's got some speed figures where, I mean, like I say, I'm not a total speed figure guy, but at some point when your speed figure is just 10 points higher than another horse,
everybody else,
like you're just faster. But I mean, I guess the angle is the meltdown. So with my meltdown, I'm just going with Saludos Amigos. I think he can sit 6th or 7th. He has proven in the past he can pass some horses. I do think Kobe's Back may be the longer of the California crew, and he's probably the most unlikely because everybody's going to say that he can't win at 6, so that's the one I'm going to take. To me, it's the logic of illogic, but I'm going to go with Saludos Amigos, and I like Kobe's Back. But Run Happy as a legitimate favorite. I think even Stall Walking Dude is playable. I mean, he's not my win pick, but I just think 2 or 3 of these horses are going to disappoint. And I'm not so sure all of these horses are going to fire. That's the problem with the sprint every year is you go into it thinking, oh boy, these 3 horses are going to duel, or these 2 horses are going to fire. And normally what I remember is there's always 1 or 2 horses that mysteriously do not run a step. And that's why there's usually been prices in the 2nd and 3rd spot, and sometimes it's even been on the win end. But yeah, for some reason, it just seems like you get some no-shows every year in this race. So I'm kind of hoping either on 2 things. Either Run Happy's a no-show, or it's just a suicidal mission, and he just can't, handle all the pressure if some of the other speeds do show up. But it's a race I wouldn't want to single.
No.
It's a race that I think Run Happy on paper looks good, but sometimes goofy things happen in that race, and who knows.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those. Run Happy seems to just be kind of a freak of nature, and when you watch his races, you think, oh my gosh, he can't lose this, but then when you're handicapping and just think everything's telling you have to, I mean, it's a sprinter who's known to miss the start, who's drawn inside, who all week people are saying he's working way too fast. Like, just one of those things like, can he win? Yeah, but everything logical about handicapping this race is telling me you have to take a shot against him. And if he wins, it'll be one of the best stories of the meeting.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And the thing of it was is every single thing that you just said that was illogical was just as illogical 2 races ago when he won the King's Bishop.
It was, exactly.
That's what
And
I mean. But the point was, is he proved that day he was the fastest horse. So now
yes.
all of that same illogic applies, and he may win again. But the point
Yeah.
is that the difference is what I'm saying is the last 2 races ago he was 11-1. Now he's 5-2, 3-1
And against better horses as a whole.
as a whole. Although the King's Bishop is just usually tough 3-year-olds, but still, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, as a whole, it's interesting because it'll be just interesting to watch him do what he does, which is he just runs fast.
Yeah.
The mile on the turf this year, there's no Wise Dan, there's no Goldakova, there's no Miesk, and we're going to have a new winner of the mile unless, we can harken back to last year when Kara Knighty won.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Caraconti would be among my picks in here. I do think that he obviously ran really well in this race last year, but I do think he was a beneficiary of a very fast tempo up front that wasn't really foreseen by most. And then, from the wide draw, he dropped to the back and he just got, a really nice run through the race. And he comes in here after having had some issues. He had an injury that kept him out for about half the year following his win in the Breeders' Cup. He missed a lot of planned goals along the way. He's only recently come back just a couple years ago, and he's been fine, but nothing overly exceptional. I think he's a horse who, I understand how some people, really scored on him big last year, so they're going to play him back, but he's just not a horse that it's real easy to get excited about for this sort of a spot. As far as the Euros do go, I am very kind of sad that Time Test drew so poorly. I couldn't have him in the spot now. I think, the cut in the ground is going to be an issue. He wants it fast to begin with, and then now from the 12 hole, he has some speed, so they're going to have to push him forward a little bit, but I still think there's the potential he could get caught out wide, or get caught out going faster than he would normally want to go. But either way, I see him having some potential troubles in here and having Ryan Moore aboard, and especially if Ryan Moore wins a couple races before this, you'd have to expect him to take some play. As far as the Euros go, I instead would side with Make Believe. Make Believe is a horse who, overseas, he typically wins his races, making all, going gate to wire, so he does have plenty of pace. He should be able to, I think, kind of just sit there in front of the rest of the pack behind. Presumably, obviously, would take the lead over Tepin, would be second, pushing him, and then Taurus will be somewhere thereabouts. And I think in behind Taurus, then you'll find Make Believe, and I think that's probably the spot in this race that you want to be. The only other horse I think I would be really interested in using in this race would be Mushawish. I think a lot of people have forgotten about him because he did have some issues with his feet going into Dubai, and there was some concern whether or not they'd run him. They did end up running him, and I thought all things considered he ran well. He finished third behind Solo, so can't really knock that form too much considering what Solo has done since then. He had a long layoff, and then presumably, I guess, to give him some time with his foot. But then he came back in the 4-star Dave, and he was 1 1/4 lengths back behind Grand Arch, and I just thought he had a really tough trip on the inside there. He had to steady multiple times. But I think people really have forgotten about how good of a miler he is and how good he was at Gulfstream earlier in the year. And he's another one who I just think could kind of sit in there mid-pack and kind of trip out in a race like this. And 15-1 on him, I think, is a ridiculous price. And, there was a point halfway through the season that people were saying Mushawish was the best turf miler in America. And because he's missed some time now, people don't seem to be of that opinion. He's no way is he a 15-1 shot. So Make Believe, I think, is your most likely winner, but I'll certainly be using Mushawish in places.
Yeah, I'm going with obviously. I just think that all the Euros are going to get bunched up, and the last 2 years he got beat by better horses, but they were better horse. And last year's pace was weird.
Yeah.
I just think they're going to let him go. They said
You think
2 years ago
Tepin
he
will let him
faded.
go?
yeah, I think Obvious is just faster than him. I just think they're all gonna, it's not so much letting them go. They just said, well, he faded 2 years ago. He faded last year. He
Well, I
faded in the
think he's going to
Woodbine
be on a
Mile.
long lead, but I wonder if they'll push him or not.
One of these times he may forget to stop. I'll take the chance at 18 to 1. I mean, I
Mm.
just think he's going to take him longer than anybody really thinks. And he may run fifth again like he did the last 2 years. But
Mhm.
he's one of the, like last year, I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of people sweating bullets when he had a 4 length lead. I mean, one of these times, if he ever catches a course that just where everybody doesn't make up ground or all of a sudden it plays to speed or like it's the logic of illogic. And I just think he's going to be ridiculously long because everybody thinks they've seen this story 2 years in a row. And it might be the story the third year in a row, but you don't know that until after the race. And there's too many horses. I don't know where they're going to be sitting. I know where Obviously is going to, on the turn, I know Obviously will have the lead. Now, he might finish 10th, but I'd rather have the lead on the turn than try to guess where half these Euros are going to be. Because last year, that didn't do you any good with Tourmore because nobody expected him on the lead and he was up dueling for the lead. So,
Yeah. I mean, the one
you
thing
know,
I think I would say is I would definitely rather bet, obviously, at 15 to 1 than I'd rather bet Monda at least who beat him at 15 to 1. I thought, obviously, was one of the eye catchers of the Woodbine Mile. So, people, I think maybe a lot of people are leaning to Monda at least after that race, but I'd much rather have obviously than him at similar prices.
well, and that's weird too because they put them both at 15 to 1 and they both can't be 15 to 1. So the
No.
betting, on the win bets, I assume Mondaliste will be a little lower.
Yes.
I think on the daily doubles and stuff like that, Mondaliste will be over, and I think that's where Obviously we'll start to pick up,
Well, I
in a
think
daily
he's
double, I
clearly
think he'll
the
be a little
more
higher.
value coming from that race, that's for sure.
So yeah, I was surprised at that. I do like Tourist. I mean, he had a really rough trip the last time, and I think he's better than Grand Arch. So yeah, I guess I think Tourist is better than Grand Arch, and I think Obviously is better than Mondaliste. But the 4 Europeans are going to be the horses that are going to be bet off the board.
Yeah, and I think of the Europeans, the one I would say who I'm probably most to guess might be the favorite in here. Her name's Esoteric. She's pretty much been a different horse this year. I'm, not sure if they've figured something out with her in training or whatnot, but this year she's been as good as ever. That's for sure. Ground is no concern. She's very versatile. She could be in the front end of races, maybe not this fast of a race, but she can be on the front end of races. She can be closing from dead last. My concern with her is that she's gone left-handed 4 times. She's lost 3 of them, and those 3 losses were bad. You could really make the case that they were the 3 worst races she's ever ran. That's probably very nitpicky, but at 7 to 2, I'm gonna get picky.
That race overall, of all the races, I'm not diving into it. I'm going to put $2 across the board on Obviously, and I just think you're because the thing of it is everybody says the Euros are better, but yeah, that's true. But one of them won't fire. We know that every year
Well, and
there's
in a
one Euro
race
that
like that, where you're going to go so quickly, it doesn't always flatter the Europeans. It's pretty much an opposite race shape to what they're used to as well, so it's
yeah.
hard to kind of judge the form.
And like I say, one of them won't show. There'll be one horse that after the race, everybody will say, "Oh, he obviously didn't show." Well, good luck picking which one of those 4 doesn't fire. I mean that, but we know that's what's going to happen. I mean,
Yes.
they never run 1-2. I mean, one of
No.
them always disappears. So
Mhm.
that's my issue with that type of race. So that one I'm treading my least confident pick of the day is Obviously, but on the other hand, where often do you know that going into the stretch you'll have a 20 to 1 on the lead and he might run
Yes.
10th again? So I guess that's my angle is that I guess if you're going to scream for a while, scream on a front runner
Yes.
rather than waiting all race and then have your horse finish 10th and run
Mhm.
10th all the way around.
Yeah.
The Juvenile is the 9th race, and this year the morning line favorite drew the 13th post, and it'll be interesting to see if he even goes off favorite because everybody was against the horse even before the post positions were drawn.
Definitely, I would say the most vulnerable short price on the entire meeting is Nyquist. I do not like him. I didn't like him last time, and I bet Swipe, and so frustrating. Swipe got so much trouble. I thought he clearly was the better of the 2 that day, but it's unfortunate. Swipe's drawn 12, which does him no favors in here either. So you can't really touch him. So I have to find somebody else to kind of try to tackle Nyquist in here, who I think is, I mean, I don't know if you think differently, but to me, it's just a blatant non-stayer at this trip. So I'm gonna go for Exaggerator in here. I really liked his last race. It was over the same course, but it was wet. It was muddy that day. But he put in just this extremely eye-catching middle move to snag the lead. If you haven't seen it, that British Futurity is a replay definitely worth watching. And, you know, he got nailed late by Brody's Cause, and I'm just of the belief that Brody's Cause, he's a Giant's Causeway. They tend to really take to the surface when it's wet. And so I think he upgraded for having gotten the wet surface. It was muddy, a little bit testing, which favored a closer. So I'm a little bit against Brody's Cause because I am of that belief that he was upgraded by the conditions of the track that day, but Exaggerator really, really caught my eye, and he would be one who I would be using in here. I think it's a really tough race though because so many of these preps were over wet surfaces. I mean, I don't even know how you can decide what to do with Greenpoint Crusader because on one hand he could just be an absolute freak and have a ton of potential, and on the other hand, you look at his breeding and it screams sloppy. So he's the horse who probably the horse I would be most scared that would beat me on top because at 4-1 I'm not going to use him on top, but he might just be that good.
Yeah, no, that's the, this is a good puzzle because every year you always get the precocious early winner, which to me that totally fits Nyquist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a fast horse. He's by Uncle Mo. He came out of the gate, won at 5 furlongs. His speed figures are getting lower as he stretches out. Just visually, he looked life and death the last race. So you can't take him. Brody's Cause, I've said this multiple times, but whenever a horse wins in the last stride, you just don't take him and you say, well, he won the last time and he won 2 races ago in the final stride. Well, yeah, then fine. He was the outlier, but again, last race, he was 12-1. Now he's the favorite.
Yeah.
Like, if he beats me for his 3rd win in a row, winning in the final stride at 7-2, I don't care. Like, so I'm throwing out Brody's Cause. And I agree with you 100%. Those Giants Causeways love Keeneland, and I don't care if it's grass, synthetic, mud, dirt. It just seems like every Giants Causeway wins at Keeneland. Like if you look at their handicappers database, they win on every surface at every distance, and they're all at Keeneland. Like it is very bizarre. Like for some reason, so I'm just kind of thinking maybe he did like that wet surface, and he was in a groove because he'd won the previous race at Churchill, and
the track was playing very, very well to closers that day too. It was one of the few days of the meet that closers really were winning all throughout that card.
It's a good race. I legitimately like Riker, and he's my favorite angle, Polly to dirt. But the problem is I think Nyquist is good enough to mess with him for a while. So I can't take Riker, but I do think he could hang around for longer than people think. Greenpoint Crusader, I think, is a great horse. I made a lot of money on him the last time. Normally, I never bet those horses coming back, so I'm not taking him. So I'm going with Exaggerator just because of that mid-race move the last time. I really like his workouts, and for some reason we can put a man on the moon, but we couldn't tape his last workout. I don't understand that at all. We've got all of his other workouts out on tape, but the last one, which is the one I really wanted to see. Yeah, for some reason that one didn't get recorded, but some 40-1 who's running on a claiming race did that day. And then also, I just want to make a point, Tal of Saval did not want to be on the lead, did not want to be on the rail. It was raining. There was 4 inches of water. Like, he's just a silly price, and he's not that bad of a horse. He's going to come from off the pace, and I firmly believe he can finish in the top 4. I just can't take him on top. But Tal of Saval is a much better horse, and this horse we will hear a lot more from down the line. He just got a bad race flow, and he got stuck at the rail with 6 inches of water the last time, and he just burned himself out doing 110.4.
Well, and that's always an angle, too, I think, with the younger horses especially, is taking a horse who was on the lead on the rail being pressured from the outside. I always think that's much more difficult for a young horse to mentally process being, squeezed down on that rail being pressured, and then, you come to a race, you get him off the rail, and a lot of times they'll improve.
So yeah, I'm going with Exaggerator, but I will use on all my tickets. I'll use Conquest Big E. I will definitely use. I'm going to use Riker too. I just think that sloppy track was not him, and then I'll use Talus Saval. And if Nyquist wins or Brody's Cause wins, I guess I won't win, but I just can't take those horses at low prices. Greenpoint Crusader I like. I think he's going to run a good race. I think he's a good horse, but I just don't know if the race shape is going to fit him this time. Mile and a half on the turf. Biggest favorite of the weekend. Can't lose. Guaranteed. Lock up the house on Golden Horn is what everybody's saying.
Not sure I would go that way. For one, he's a horse who you're going to need to see him on the day because he's had a very, very long campaign. So you want to see how he looks on the day, if he, looks healthy and good in his coat and the like. I don't like the rail at all for him. The word on the street, I guess, is that they've pulled the rails back in and it's opened up that preserved ground along the rail, and that it's very deep, and that with the rain that's still coming in, you expect it to be pretty soft in that area. He's nowhere near as fast as people think. For some reason, all of Twitter thinks Shining Copper is going to zoom to the lead and Golden Horn is going to be sitting second. I'd be pretty shocked if that happens. He's not all that fast. You have to remember their races are run at a much slower tempo than ours. And actually, if you go back and watch his Irish Champion Stakes, he was very lazy out of the gate and had to be ridden like, extremely hard in the beginning just to even make the front in a race where they'd be going much slower than they would here. He'll be shorter than 4 to 5 as well. So there's a lot of questions about him. And I think that for me, this is a spot where when you're playing your tickets, for me, I don't play super large tickets. Mine are, pretty small. I don't have an enormous budget. So for me, it's not worth it for me to add him to my tickets because the payout won't justify the cost of adding him. We kind of had a similar talk about this, I know, last year on the Churchill Down Kentucky Derby undercard with Wise Down. So I look at this as a similar scenario. I'm going to single this race. It might be the death of me, but I'm going to single this race in favor of the Pizza Man. I think that he's going to sit fairly handy over a mile and a half. He doesn't have to come from the back over this distance. He does have a little gate speed there, and I think he's the horse who's going to trip out in this race. Soft ground only helps him make it as much of a stamina test as possible. Only helps him. I think he's going to get first jump on Golden Horn, and he's a horse that when he gets moving, he just doesn't stop. So, is he of the class of an ARC winner? No, but I think the conditions of this race and the pace shape of this race, I think everything suits the Pizza Man just perfectly. So for me, I'm only going to use him. I'm not going to, be making $1,000 tickets through this race, but I think he's the value. He's the horse that I think is worth it to use, whereas some of these others aren't. I'll make a small blurb on Found, and she's probably the European who I just can't use. I used her in the ARC, and she got shut up and had no chance, and people really jumped on her because she ran on late there, but they went so slow, and she was out the back the whole time that if she didn't run on late, something would be wrong to an extent. They went so slow, then a back marker should run on late. She came back and ran well in the Irish Champion Stakes. The concerns with her is they've dropped her out the back of her races over these longer trips, so expect her to be in the back. And they really have been riding her for luck, bobbing and weaving between horses, which indicates to me that she might be incapable of passing horses on the outside. Doesn't mean she can't win, but she's going to get some play. She might be about 5 or 6 to 1, and I just don't want a horse at that price that's going to be ridden for luck. So I'm hoping the Pizza Man delivers.
Yeah, the Pizza Man could trip out. I mean, he's just as good as, like I say, this is another division the Americans just been taking their turns. It's been Slumber won once, Big Blue Kitten won once, Red Rifle won once, Twilight Eclipse even won once this year. And the Pizza Man wins all the time. It doesn't matter where the Pizza Man does. So I'm going to end up going with Red Rifle just because I think he's going to drift up to closer to 20 to 1 from his morning line. No real reason why. I just think him, Big Blue Kitten, and Slumber are all about even. And the last time he got that weird trip, Shining Copper got up by 12 lengths. I don't think Shining Copper is going to get up by 12 this time. And I just think that messed up that whole race. But the thing of it is the last time I thought he would do that, and that's why I like Twilight Eclipse. And this time I think he's not, and so that's why I like Red Rifle this time. So, but I am in the camp that I don't, I don't buy the old, oh, well, ARC losers can win, so that means ARC winners can win. No, the whole point is that if you win the ARC, you drain the tank. And he drained the tank on September 12th. He drifted out. He drained the tank on October 4th. Now he's got to ship across the world. And yeah, the Euros are better, but people act like these Europeans are 20 lengths better. Like, he would be 5 lengths better if he ran his best race. So if he doesn't run his best race, he's only 2 lengths better. Well, then it just becomes a trip race. Like, I just don't think people, like, do you really think Golden Horn is 20 lengths better than Big Blue Kitten? I mean,
No.
Big Blue Kitten or Slumber would run 10th or 11th in the ARC.
Yes. I
Or
mean,
12th.
but I think that's the thing too, is that people look at these races and they say, you know, if all these horses run their best, this horse is just the best horse and wins. I mean, if we sat here and took every race and handicapped each race for who's the best horse, you're going to lose a lot of races because it actually is pretty rare that the best horse wins the race. Could Golden Horn come here and win by 5? Absolutely, but I just don't think at the the prices he's going to be at, he's going to be worth using. I hate his rail draw. I can't emphasize enough how much I don't like that he's on the rail because he's not as fast as people are giving him credit for. I mean, I'm sitting here right now. I have him projected sitting around the same spot as Twilight Eclipse and Slumber in running. That's not going to be anywhere near the front. So I don't know where people are seeing this trip where he's going to be up behind Shining Copper. I think that horse is going to be the Pizza Man. So if you're looking at this as a trip notes race that you think he's going to trip out, then I think you need to have a look at Pizza Man over this distance because I think he's going to get the jump on Golden Horn.
Yeah, like I say, he can win, just like other races. Run Happy can win. Yeah, we can always identify the quote unquote best horse in the race, but I think there's legitimate reasons why the ARC winner has not won this race. He's a 3-year-old. Not only did he run huge on October 4th, he ran huge on September 12th. Like I say, I think the perception is that these Euros are 20 lengths better. They're not. They're 1 to 2 lengths better.
Well, and take a look at the trips too. Lately, he's been up forward on the pace in slow races. This is going to be an opposite race shape to that. They're going to go pretty fast early. I just think there's a lot of logical reasons to say, when you map out the scenarios, there's several scenarios here where he can lose. So how many losing scenarios can be out there when you get to the point to say, okay, I cannot bet this 4 to 5 shot. Could he easily beat us? Is he the most likely winner of the race? Absolutely. I don't think anybody would say that he's not. But at some point here, you have to take stands if you want to make some money, and this is a race where I'm going to take a stand.
Well, and sometimes it's not even making the money. Sometimes it's just, if you have enough reasons why a horse can't win, well then sometimes they don't win. And I think there's a lot of reasons why he can't win. Normally, we'll get to American Pharoah next, but there's not a lot of reasons why American Pharoah can't win. I can name 7 why Golden Horn can't win. One of them is shipping across the world. That's a legitimate reason.
Yeah. But I also just think when you're structuring your tickets here as well, I mean, there's a pick 4 that starts in race 8. If you're like the Euros in there, okay, they're all short prices. The Juvenile maybe has a little bit of a chance for a mid-range price to win in there. But then now if you're going to use the Euros there, if you're going to use Golden Horn here, then what are you really gaining from it? Because even if Golden Horn wins and the Euro wins and you hit your ticket, you might end up losing money.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I say, but sometimes you just got to look at the race and just say, I don't think this horse is going to win, and I don't really care what his odds are. I mean,
Well, and it's what is a horse's chance of winning with respect to his odds as well. I mean, Golden Horn might be hammered so short that people, put him in there basically as a certainty, and he's not. And, a horse like the Pizza Man who has the potential to trip out in here, who seems to just win races, 15 to 1, you have to think, is he the most likely winner here? No. Is he better than a 15 to 1 shot as far as his chances of winning go? I'd say absolutely.
Well, and the other thing is, as you said, the first thing you said was you got to see how he looks on the track. Well, when you're playing pick 4s and pick 3s and pick 6s,
you can't even do that.
You can't do that. So, I mean, yeah, if he looks great and you want to bet a bunch of win money on him, that's a good bet.
Well,
but what
I
I'm
think
saying,
you absolutely have to do that with him because he's had such a long taxing season. You might bet your pick 4, you're single to Golden Horn. He walks out there and you're like, oh, wow, his quote looks awful. Great.
and what we've seen in the past is, it's kind of the dirty little secret, is these Euros don't seem to want to scratch once they're here.
No.
That's why I bring up the no-shows all these years.
Well, they've kind of indicated already that people have asked, if they get soft ground, are they going to scratch him? And they've kind of acted like no.
Yeah, and then we've seen that in the past with some of these no-shows, and then you find out after the race, oh, well, yeah, he was acting up in the morning, or he didn't do this in the stall. And so, yeah, they seem to have a tendency when they come over here that they're running and they don't scratch. So it'll be interesting to see if Golden Horn continues that, however he looks or however his day goes up until then. The finale, the $5 million Breeders' Cup Classic. I long for the days when Tom Durkin used to be able to say the richest race in the world at the end of it. We can't do that anymore because of Dubai, but it's still $5 million. And, drew a 10-horse field, a couple of outsiders, but I guess take us through the race.
I'm not sure how bettable this race is. I think your most likely winner is probably American Pharoah. He gets back to a race that the conditions flatter him. He's going to go to the front and he's probably going to get, an uncontested lead. I think people have Beholder pushing him potentially from the outside, but I actually think a scenario like that hinders Beholder much more than it handles Pharoah, unless she's going to attack him like Frosted, which means they're both going to lose. So I see, the scenarios that include Beholder going forward, for the most part, still favor American Pharoah to me, if that makes sense. So, I mean, either she goes over and tracks him, which means he gets an uncontested lead, or she's going to just kind of sit on his back end, which still I don't think is enough to stop him, and if anything, probably forces her to run faster than is typical and hinders her, which then, of course, in turn helps himself. The only scenario I see her beating him is if she just completely tackles him like Frosted does, but then, like I said, in that case, then they both lose, and probably someone like Honor Code picks up the pieces. So I think American Pharoah is clearly the most likely winner. Beholder's the horse who, in exactas and tries, I'm going to try to beat. I don't want to use her in this race. The other short price I'd be looking to beat is Tonalist. I don't like the rail draw because he needs to be able to get first jump on Honor Code. So by drawing the rail, no blinkers means he has no gate speed now. He's probably most likely, what I would see him do is he's going to have to drop out the back and then circle the entire field, which, I just don't like that. I think that's really tough against this quality of competition. So, my kind of way of attacking this race is going to be to key American Pharoah on top, and then I'm going to try to beat Beholder and Tonalist. So, I'll use American Pharoah on top. I could see using horses like Keen Ice, Frosted, and Honor Code underneath in the second and third spots. It's not going to be an enormous payout, but I think it'd be a good way to, make a decent amount off this race. You got to beat a couple of these favorites. You can't use them all, and I think American Pharoah is the one to use, and maybe not so much Beholder or Tonalist.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pharoah is the deserving favorite. The one thing about this crop is we have no way of gauging 3-year-olds against older horses.
No.
So that normally you have a couple. I mean, I'm not going to count Dortmund winning against older horses, but literally that is the only horse I could find from a 3-year-old that had beaten an older horse, and it had to be last week in a mile race at Santa Anita with a 1-9 shot. So there is no comparisons. I'm anti-Beholder. I just think that Pacific Classic race shape, it looks bizarre because it was bizarre. At the exact moment she made her move, 2 horses exactly stopped, and so it looked like this slingshot thing, and Trevor went like, oh my God, Beholder's passing like a flying bird here, and really it was 2 things going on at once. 2 horses backpedaled fast, and she made a move forward, and so I just don't think that she can I just think that it looks great on paper, but visually I know what I saw, that she's a good horse. She's 15 for 20 lifetime, but I just don't think she's a 1.25 mile horse against the boys.
Well, you have to rate the race too. Catch a Flight, who was second there, who I think throughout the season would have any claims to run in this race. They decided not to run here. You would think they don't think he's good enough. So how much does it really mean? The whole field, yeah, she beat them by a lot, but I mean, none of the second place finisher in that race would be 50 to 1 in here.
So yeah, I think, Pharoah will have the lead, but I'm going to go back to basic handicapping school, and I firmly believe grade 1 races at 10 furlongs are won by grade 1 10 furlong horses. I'm picking Tonalist for the second time this year. I picked him in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. I think him and Honor Code are the best two older horses in America. I think they're the best two 10-furlong horses in America. Now, it is interesting because everyone's going to say, well, wait a minute, Honor Code has never ran 10 furlongs, which normally would be a death knell. But this is the horse that everybody said was going to win the Derby last year when he was a 2-year-old. So I don't understand how his breeding got worse as a 4-year-old.
It all changed. He's a one-turn miler now.
And we all know that the Kelso was a total prep, so you got to toss that race out. I don't think people realize how good his Met Mile was.
Yes, I don't even think people realize how good his Whitney was.
Well,
too.
his Whitney was good, and it was, well, I think it's good because of other reasons, because I think Liam's Map is really good, but that's a whole nother discussion. But again, in the Whitney, he won in the last stride. And the Met
But I
Mile,
think
put
people
him
don't
away.
realize there. People sit there and they say Liam's Map totally stopped, and that's why Honor could win, and blah blah blah. But look at a few things. One, Liam's Map carried way less weight than Honor Code did. Obviously, Honor Code was a top weight in that race given his credentials. Then you also have to look at the sectionals, and that's where it tells the story that Honor Code is a 10-furlong horse. That's second last sectional. So from the 3/4 pole to the mile, Liam's Map hadn't even completely died on his run yet there, and Honor Code ran 1 full second faster. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I also think sometimes the way I handicap these races is like, do you really think, like if you say Honor Code can't go 10 furlongs, so really, you would bet hard aces over Honor Code?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so then, like, so do that with a couple other horses. You would bet Keen Ice over Honor Code?
No.
Like, so then you start getting them up, like that puts them automatic, like that puts him in the top 4, and then if you just figure maybe we don't know what he can do, I guess I'd rather take the unknown than to take 15-1 on Keen Ice and 50-1 on hard aces. I mean, and Glen Eagles, we haven't even talked about him. I mean, I think he's actually better than that last race as well, but that's how I handicap. So then I just say like, well, Honor Code would be favored over all of these horses at a mile, would he not?
Oh,
Probably.
absolutely.
I think he'd
Which
be.
is stupid.
Yeah, so he's either going to win or not win. The breeding's there, and the trainer is a genius. I mean, this is a trainer who had inside information win by 13 lengths in the distaff. His horses notoriously peak on Breeders' Cup Day. Even when they lose, that's the kicker. When they lose, they peak on this day.
Yeah.
So I just have to go with Tonalist and Honor Code. I'm only using those 2 tickets on every single bet I make. I do think both horses are going to be lower than their morning line odds because I think all the East Coast money knows that these 2 horses are really the best 2 horses. And I think the big bettors are not going to buy into Beholder.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm the same for me in this race. It's tough because I'm almost attacking in a couple ways. I'm going to have a trifecta where I key American Pharoah on the top, and like I said, I use Honor Code underneath along with Frosted and Keen Eyes. But then I'm getting a little reverse. Then if I have a pick 3 or pick 4 that ends in this leg, then I'm going to be using only Honor Code because I can't afford to use American Pharoah there. I'm hedging a little bit, I guess is what I would say in a race like this, just trying to get one nice payout. But it's not a race that you want to be diving into head first at all. I just think for me, my main play is going to be Honor Code in my multiple race wagers, and then I'll do the trifecta King Pharaoh, a small one, just enough to kind of hedge my bet back should he win the race.
Yeah, now for me, this is my race of the year. I'm diving headfirst into it. And not so much because I really don't like Beholder. So to me, that's the edge. If she truly can't run 10 furlongs against the boys, that's the track takeout right there. If she's 3-1, that's the track takeout. So just by playing all the other combinations without her, you can literally make money on the race, first and second.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally box 4 horses, toss her out, and make money. I'm not saying it would be much if it was AP over Frosted or Keen Ice, but you can, if you truly believe Beholder can't go 10 furlongs against the boys, you can make this a mathematical race. And like I say, American Pharoah's good, but we have that's just all visual. And as great of a visual handicapper as I am, I'm going with the cold, hard numbers. I'm going with the 2 best older horses in America that have been primed for this race all year long at Keeneland with all the Keeneland breeders, with all the Keeneland connections. I'm playing every political angle there is in this race, and I'm betting it hard. I'm betting Tonalist and I'm betting Honor Code. And I truly believe, American Pharoah can win. I don't think Beholder can win. And I don't think Keen Ice can win. I do think Frosted has a shot.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think there is an angle if you, like I said, I don't like Tonalist from the draw. I think he was in big trouble from there. But if you do like Tonalist, I think it is fair and fair enough to bring up that it is at Keeneland with all those breeders there that they did say at the beginning of the year, this is his last year. He's retiring. This could be some sort of a putting himself on show for all the breeders to bring their mares to him at the end of the year.
And I think with Honor Code, I mean,
Yes.
it's no secret the owner of Honor Code is the head of the Breeders' Cup Committee. And so I think all of the Keeneland gang will be there, and I am playing the connections in this race, and I do think those are the two. I just think they're the best 2 10-furlong horses in America. Long time ago, in Grade 1 races, you only play 10-furlong horses. Yeah, some of these goofball claimers can win Grade 2s and Grade 3s at 6 furlongs, but you don't see $25,000 claimers win Grade 1 races at 10 furlongs. So I want the 2 best bred, best trained horses that, from all indications, are coming into this race perfect. There is a small question mark on Beholder. She did spike a fever. And American Pharoah's got 60-some days off. Like, that's just not, like, that's, if he is the best horse, fine, he'll win. And if he just goes wire to wire, I guess that doesn't bother me. But
No.
I can't take Beholder. And then after the race, if Pharoah loses, if all of a sudden everybody starts coming out, well, God, he was a 3-year-old, and oh boy, he had 65 days off, and oh boy, he shipped on Tuesday. I mean, it's after the race everybody brings up all these things. Well, to me, the only way you can win money on him is to bring him up before the race and bet it accordingly.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting too, if you're saying, I'm looking for the value in here. The value doesn't always mean an enormous price. I mean, to me, I know you and I are on Honor Code at much bigger prices, so it's hard to look at it at this, but at 5-1 Honor Code, it's the value of this race. How often do you get a Met Mile winner who also won the Whitney, who's never got off higher than 7-1, and aside from that, has never got off higher than 5-2 all year? You're gonna get him at 5-1. Most years, people would be jumping for joy over those sorts of odds on a horse with this kind of credential.
Yeah, but see, I don't think he's actually valued in that, because I go back to the Met Mile. He was 7-1 against weaker horses. So would you rather? I mean, I'm not trying.
Aside from that, he's gotten bet very hard, though. That's the one race this year.
But the point is that against weaker horses, he was 7-1 at a mile, coming off a bad race. Now, granted, he's still coming off the Kelso here. I don't know. I just think 364 days a year, I want to talk about value. In the Breeders' Cup Classic, I want to pick the winner.
Yes.
I don't care about the odds. I don't care if Tonalist is 3-5 on the board. I'm betting him. I mean, 364 days a year, talk about value. This day, I want to pick the winner, and I'm going to brag it if I do.
Yeah.
I don't care what their odds are. I'm betting those 2 horses. So you won't hear me say value, because I don't care about the value. The rest of the year, you can play value. I mean, if everybody was winning all this money on values, I mean, I just don't see all that value. I just think sometimes you pick the winner of the race and you win a couple bucks. So
yeah, I think too, we haven't mentioned Glen Eagles, as you said earlier, and he's one who we'll see what happens if people play him at all. A lot of the breeders and the like have really, made point of the fact that Aidan O'Brien has sent several horses over for the Classic, and they all have run really well for the most part, going close. I couldn't have him in this race at all. Think he's not fast enough. It's very likely he'll be just completely outpaced in this race. He certainly is not bred for it. He's a miler. He's a miler through and through. People are trying to take that his dam is a foal to Giant's Causeway to mean that, he all of a sudden suddenly is this magnificent dirt horse, but his stride is not that of a dirt horse. And he still is by Galileo. If you were going to use any sort of a breeding angle, his breeding is kind of the reverse of Lee, who runs in the dirt mile. But again, Lee's in the dirt mile because he doesn't stay 10 furlongs. So Glen Eagles is a horse that has way too many questions about him. I would be shocked if he wins this race, and I'd be extremely surprised if he featured anywhere in the top 4. I couldn't have him. I don't really care about the connections. This race is one that just reeks of a horse who has fallen by the wayside and really hasn't trained on like they expected him to. So put him in a race where he has nothing to lose, because had he run fifth in the mile on the turf, people would have a lot of questions about him. So this is the kind of a race for him that it's very little risk, potentially big reward, but I'm not on board with it at all.
Well, I think the key there is he is a miler. See, I think he's going to play a role in this race. Do I think he can win? No, but I'm counting on him making his move at that mile mark to soften up AP and Beholder. I am. I mean,
Oh,
to me, he is a key to this race.
I don't think so.
Well, we'll find out on Saturday, but he is. I think he's a factor. I don't think he's going to run seventh all the way around. I just don't. So I think at some point he does make his move, because then they can just say, yeah, he made his move. He just couldn't go 10 furlongs. Ryan Moore, like I say, I don't want him in those other races, but this race, I want him to ride like Ryan Moore. I want him to, Ryan Moore doesn't ride 40-1 horses with no shot. Yeah, he can say he rides for O'Brien, whatever, but he'll still give it a ride. The horse may fade by 30, but he'll give it a ride. This horse is I still think he's better than Hard Aces and Keen Ice, even on his worst day.
Better than Hard Aces, probably yes. Keen Ice, I think Keen Ice he has a place in here. I think he'll obviously be closing late. He's very consistent, so I'm not sure I'm on board with he's better than Keen Ice. But Hard Aces, yes, I could agree with that.
And Smooth Roller, I think he might even be better than him. I have no idea what to do with Smooth Roller. I'm not playing him, but
I don't like him. He hasn't even been out there doing anything yet, has he? He showed up several days ago, and he's one who I haven't seen anything about him working or on the track or doing anything.
Well, they showed a picture of him or whatever he was doing. They showed a picture of him on the track.
Walking around the dirt.
Yeah, or whatever he was doing, but they did show a picture of him. He's there, at least
Yeah, we know he's there, but I'm not sure he's actually doing all that much.
So, yeah. But I think it's like I say, I think this
his
race.
last recorded work that I have is 10 days ago, so I'm not sure how much of a good sign that is.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Well, like I say, I always say the Breeders' Cup Classic, 364 days a year, 10 races a day, everybody can talk about value. Just pick a winner. Just pick a horse you like. I don't even care if it's Hard Aces, but at least make a stand on something. I just don't understand this eternal, why every handicapper in every race, every day of the year, every horse has to have value. It just seems like, why can't somebody actually pick a winner? And that's what I'm going to try to do.
I think it depends on how you're playing this too. Like, see, you and I went against Golden Horn, so if you're playing your tickets and you're against Golden Horn, well then you can afford to use an American Pharoah here. But if you're going to use Golden Horn, then I don't know how you use Golden Horn and American Pharoah. I'm not sure how that's going to work on your tickets. So people need to be conscious of the prices that they're putting into these tickets that they're creating, is all I would say.
Yeah, the tickets can get spendy, and of course, now the handle's so high, like you won't get what was it? It paid $220 a couple of weeks ago with Beholder and somebody else. Well, that's on. This card.
No, that's not going to happen.
Like this would pay $4 even if those two horses win, but. Right. You'd actually get a higher parlay. $2 win on Golden Horn would get you $3, and $3 win on Pharoah would get you $6. So that's actually a bad bet. So
no.
So that's why you can play the double, and it might pay $4.60.
Yeah. But then that's also, I think, to be aware. Like, if you really think Golden Horn and American Pharoah are the two locks of the meeting and they cannot lose, then that might be the way to attack it in the double. Versus, spending a bunch of money on the first two legs of the pick four and then winning it and barely coming out on top. So there's a lot of ways to attack these races, and just always be cognizant of the prices. And same when you're playing your exactas, your trifectas. We're lucky that we have all those prices available to us at any point in time leading up to the race. Make use of them.
And just a small little note, last year, for the first time, that Breeders' Cup contest is going on.
Yes.
And it accounts for 13% of the money being wagered.
Mm-hmm.
And Bairn, much to our chagrin, I found out he would have been 9-1. There was that much money wagered on Bairn in the last 2 minutes by people in that BC contest that knocked him down to 7-1.
Wow.
So if you think you're sitting there on a 7-1 shot, and this year they're projecting double the field, and I'm just saying, like, we could all be sitting there as spectators going, well, I wonder why so-and-so went from 8-1 to 5-1. And like, no, it's that contest is making that big of a dent on big days when you have that. I mean, that is what happened. Barron got bet so hard just by contest play only. He would have been 9.5 to 1, and he went to 7
Well,
to
and it
1.
makes sense if you have that many people playing this contest thing. It's what's a $10,000 live bankroll. It's the last race of the Breeders' Cup, the Breeders' Cup races, and they're all ones who, if you're playing a contest, the price obviously matters enormously. So you're waiting until they're about loading in the gate to put your bet in.
So yeah, that's why I'm saying all these people that talk about value, well, maybe not even getting the value
You might
think.
not get it.
You might not get it. So you better pick a winner at some
Your
point.
horse might fly out of the gate, and you see the
Well,
little
and
graphic
that
go
goes the
up,
other
and you're
way, too.
confused.
You might let's just say Keen Ice. Keen Ice might be 14 to 1 with like 6 minutes to post. He might go up to 18 to 1. Like that's just, I mean, because if a horse or two goes down, then another couple have to go up.
Yes.
And then if everybody, this year it is very tricky with Golden Horn, because if everybody really thinks he's going to win in that contest, they won't bet any money that race, and they'll be forced to bet the last race.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see people running. I don't think people are
I don't
going to.
think they're going to take their 10,000 to put
Yeah.
on a 3 to 5 shot.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to bet against him either. I think it's going to come down to the Classic, and I think there's going to be some very weird wagering, exactas and doubles, and yeah. So keep an eye on that tote board, because this year they're projecting 100 more people than last year, and this year they also have satellites, so you can play that from Keeneland and Santa Anita and New York. So now you've got 100 more people betting more money. And another thing is, people don't realize when you're in those contests, and if you're in it, you're going to hedge with your own personal money. If I was alive in that contest and I was leading it, I'm going to take $1,000 off to the side and bet it on another combination that's not even in the tournament play. So that tournament is affecting odds, and more than people think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just to say, if all of a sudden people start on Twitter, why did this horse go from 8 to 1 to 4 to 1 in the final flash, and start thinking there's shenanigans going on, that contest is going to be affecting odds.
Like the Kentucky Derby last year, but that wasn't a contest.
That was just one guy.
Huge bet.
One huge bet. And that is what can happen. Like, there was a great example. Like, the horse, $1 million, dropped it from whatever, 17 to 1 to 10 to 1 or 9 to 1 or whatever.
Yeah, it was like 1 minute to go.
Yeah, so I mean, and you know what? There might be people doing that anyways. Like, there's just weird people on these days. So
well, and maybe some of these names, like you never know if some of these celebrities are there, and a horse like Big Blue Kitten in Kentucky, you never know.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying sometimes you got to just pick a horse, because these odds can go either way with you. So that's it. So your best bet of the day out of all your picks?
My best bet of the day is Undrafted in the Turf Sprint.
All right, I'm going to go with Exaggerator in the Juvenile, and we'll see how it goes. So that's going to do it for this edition of Down to the Wire.